Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. Welcome to Meet Menaca to celebrate you. Today, we are going to be talking about mindful co-parenting with Sandra Jayacodi and Tamara Jayacodi. Sandra I know that she's a mental health advocate and she is part of research and education in mental health. She's also a retired solicitor. And Tamara is a young adult who is also studying to be the future psychologist. So I'm really looking forward to this subject being discussed. Particularly in certain communities than others, co-parenting is not very well adapted nor accepted. So it is, I think, a very important aspect of parenthood and the society in general. So together we can take care of children and the upbringing has to be together, whether you live together or in two different houses. And as a family unit, we have to nourish and nurture them to become their best versions. And that is the entire point of this show today. So without further ado, let me go into the show. So first, let me come to you, Sandra. I know, being a single parent myself and who is part of the co-parenting clan, I know it's not an easy task by no means. However, we often underestimate the difficulties and how well it can also be done. So Sandra, the first question to you. What were your thoughts about co-parenting when you were filing for the divorce or separating? Because when you have children, no one takes separation or divorce very easily. We always consider what is good for the children, how they will be affected, and what are going to be the consequences. So, what was the thought process for you?
Thank you, Menaca, for having me here today, and welcome everybody, and nice to see all of you. You'd be surprised that when I was going through a divorce, the thought of co-parenting never occurred to me. Even the word did not come into my mind, because at that point, I was at a difficult point of my life too. It was not just the divorce, but I also was undergoing mental health related conditions. I was diagnosed with a long-term mental health condition. So I was already in a very bad place at the time of the divorce. And also then I had to leave my job. So there were lots of other pressing factors in my life. So the idea of co-parenting never occurred to me at that point of divorce.
Sure. I think it's really, really important for everyone to understand when people go through divorce or separation, it is not a simple thing. It's not like computers or robots. It's like so many different aspects come to play, right? Like you mentioned, we have to think of our professions, we have to think about the well-being, our health, our way of thinking, our cultures, our families, everything kind of comes into play. And I'm so glad you brought that up. And thank you so much for being so candid and transparent, because I know it is sometimes not easy to think about others when you're so caught up in that war yourself. So
Yes.
thanks for letting me know about that.
So I think there's another thing as well was that I think because I had my family support around me,
sure.
So there was my parents, my siblings, and they were all around me. So I think I didn't feel that at that point.
Sure. Thank you so much. Yeah. I mean, just to give a recap, yes, my daughter was much younger at the time, and so I guess I'm really interested to know the journey what you had. So over to you, Tamara. How did you feel when your parents were separated or divorced, and how did you see everything play out in front of your eyes?
So when this happened, I was quite young. So I think in the beginning it was kind of a shock. It was quite confusing for me. I didn't understand what this meant at all. And then after the divorce, the co-parenting took place. And then because of how young I was, I always thought if you can co-parent and if you can have a good relationship while co-parenting, why not just live under the same roof and just act as a single unit under the same roof? It didn't occur to me that living apart actually makes this work better.
Okay, it's always interesting to know how children perceive it and how children see it, isn't it? Because most of the times we interact with more adults, parents come together, we speak about our experiences, but it is, thank you so much, Tamara, for having the courage and confidence to come and speak about it so openly. And I know it's not easy, particularly being a young adult. So kudos to you for doing that. So it's really, really good to hear the other aspect of it. So before going to your mom, Sandra, to ask more questions, can I ask you, Tamara, how did you cope with the initial stages of co-parenting?
Initially, I think I didn't really accept it. I was, again, quite confused about it. Although it was working, so I was able to see my dad, I was able to see my mum, but again, I always wondered why they just couldn't live under the one roof. So it worked because financially my dad was able to support me and my mum was able to support me as well. However, I think that I was a bit stubborn and I didn't really want to accept that I was going to have to travel from one house to the other house to see my dad, to see my mum. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. You know, I know as a child it's not easy. We think as adults, we find it very, very difficult when you go through separation and divorce and difficult aspects of it. And I can definitely tell you, for me, it was mainly because I was working as a professional. I had a business to run, and I was training other people, and and then on top of it, as being a single parent is not easy. But we often underestimate the difficulties as a child, what they go through, and what kind of experiences they have. So thank you so much again, Tamara, for highlighting that. So, Sandra, coming to you, how did you cope with the co-parenting and how did you feel at the time? Because I know you said that your family was there. So, how did you cope in the initial stages with the co-parenting?
I think, when you go into the divorce route, you're never prepared, are you?
No.
Nor are you prepared when you get married. You do not know what is going to come, what are you going to come face to face with? So you're never prepared. And going through a divorce, there's no book for, there are lots of books right now, but at that time you don't want to take, well, I need to buy a book to read about co-parenting or what divorce is going to look like. You just proceed with your life, and you just, it's like a new episode, it's like a new journey, and it's like a blank book. So you need to fill it in. And I felt like I started learning about it as I went along. So there were kind of difficult situations, especially about, in the beginning, I didn't seek for support, financial support. I'm quite an egoistic person as well. So I can do it all on my own, I do not need your support kind of thing. But it come to a point where I needed the support and I was willing to ask for support.
Sure.
From her dad.
It was interesting that you said that you didn't ask for support. You were not willing to ask for support. So how did you cope in that case until up to that point?
I had some stash somewhere. So, I was living with my parents, so there was a house there, and so living in Malaysia wasn't so expensive. And for 3 years after the divorce, I took Tamara with her father's consent to Malaysia, because I think with my mental health condition, I don't think I would have been able to cope if I was here in the UK on my own with her. But my parents were a blessing, and so they practically took care of her, and from sending her to school, bringing her back, cooking for her, and I was only nagging her all the time about her studies. There would be points that I was very angry with her, and I would take out my frustrations on her. And I remember I even threw the books at her, and I have even hit her. And I'm sorry, darling, I would never do that again. So there's one thing that if I could ever change in my life is that, I want to remove that part of the journey that she went with me when I was very ill, and I really regret that part. So there was that difficulty in being a parent when you're not well. It's hard enough to be a single parent when you're well, but it's even 100 times harder when you're mentally not well at that time. So without my parents' support, I don't think I could have coped with that. And then also, but then when I came back over to London with her after 3 years, it was supposed to be for a year. We ended up staying for 3 years. Then her father was back in her life more over here. And so he was there to support. And my sister Sugi, she was another one who gave me so much of strength. And she is also a single parent, but watching her, how she coped really gave me the strength to take on that role. And you having good friends and a faith, that's really helpful.
Sure. Thank you so much, Sandra. So, and again, huge respect to you for being so candid and transparent, because it's not easy to come on a platform and tell, what you did wrong. And it's not many people have the courage to do it. So, respect for that. So when you said you took Tamara and went to Malaysia, was her dad still in the UK?
No, at that time he went to, he was also going through a difficult, when you talk about divorce, it's just not one person's pain. Both people are in kind of, they go through the pain themselves, but men don't normally talk about it. So I'm sure he must have his bitterness, his anxiety, his stress, and he left to Canada for a while to live with his sister. And then he came back to London and I came back to London. And so that's when actually the co-parenting took place. But even though I was in Malaysia, he was in her life every day. They would have telephone conversations and he would see to her needs, and he's visited us in Malaysia as well. In fact, he stayed in Malaysia, stayed on with my parents when we came back over to the UK for a while. So yeah.
Sure. So Sandra, can I ask you, when did you wake up to the fact then that co-parenting is important? How did that process start? Because you said you left to Malaysia and he left to Canada. But then at some point, both of you decided to come back to the UK. So when did you really wake up to the fact this has to be done? This is co-parenting, and how that process started in your life?
I think when I asked him for some money, some financial support, and but he was very generous. He never, said anything that if we wanted any money, and he's always spoiled Tamara with expensive gifts, and so he's really been there financially for us, and also supported her with her education. We would do things together. So that was the beginning of, I thought, that word of co-parenting. But the short break that I had in Malaysia was a bit different. But when we were back here, it wasn't any different than we were living together. So we were still in her life, in everything that she did. But I think the fact that as she was growing, as she was becoming a teenager, of course, being a teenager, they have got a different, suddenly they're wearing a different hat altogether.
Sure.
They seem to be more grown up than what they are now. Sure. And that part was difficult for me, especially that when she wanted to go out and be with her friends, I would allow her. But then at the same time, but her father was very strict with her. So he was the go place for financial security. He was the go place for personal security. He was very cautious but risk-taking and all those things. And he was the person that to go for if she was not well. Sure. And she would not come to me if she's not well, because I take it a very laid-back attitude, and he's very serious about her health. Even when she was small, I remember she won't even let me remove her earring. She would go, and but the father would do it so gently. He'll take hours to do it. So he gave her that confidence, and she had that confidence from him. So, but when it comes to going out, partying, having boyfriends, and then she would come to me, so she knew where to go to. She had, so that was how we co-parent.
Children always know where to go to, for sure. And, fathers and daughters, there's something to say about that. So, for sure, I can see why Tamara would go to her dad for some of the things, really. Okay, over to you, Tamara. So when did you realize that this is something which is real, it's happening in your life? Two different people having two different lives are trying to support you through co-parenting. So when did that dawn on you, and how did you come to terms with that in the initial stages?
So I think I was much older, so I was doing
Sure.
my A levels at this point.
Mhm.
Um, and that's when I realized that they were co-parenting, because we would still go for dinners together. We even went on holidays together. My dad would come over and my mum would cook for him. And so I think that's when I understood, okay, we're all living separately in different households, but my dad's still very much part of my life.
Mhm.
And so I took this very positively. Like I really like this, and I enjoyed being able to see him. And like my mum said, I would go to him for certain issues, and I'd go to my mum for certain issues, and I would stay with him. I don't know, on the weekends or some days after school, and I was able to like have the best of both worlds. But it definitely took me a while to accept this. So,
Mhm.
like I said, only when I was doing my A levels, whereas I think they got divorced when I was about 11 or 12 years old. So yeah, it did take a while.
So thank you, Tamara, because I am a parent myself who was involved in the co-parenting process. My daughter is like you, she is much more older now, so it becomes easier. She's much more independent now. However, in the initial stages, it is always a process, isn't it, to go through and understand. And you mentioned that you were going between the houses, and so does many other children who have to go through, including my daughter. So, how did that experience of being between the two houses, being a child of co-parenting, change over time? Because as you mentioned, you were 10, 11 in the initial stages, and then when you came back, you were almost about to do the A levels. So over the time, how did that understanding and experience change for you?
Yeah, so when it happened, like my mum said, we went away to Malaysia. So I think I was very busy. I was always distracted. I would have other things to think about, and I don't really think I processed it when I was that young. I just understood they were living apart. I didn't really process why, how they were doing and how they were doing it and all this stuff. And so only when I grew up did I realize that they were co-parenting. So I think the fact that they weren't like cats and dogs screaming at each other, shouting at each other, and just like, you know, your typical like divorcee parents that you can see on like the TV and stuff. That occurred to me when I was older, that they were not that. They were instead, they were like, I was like the center of attention, and everything they were doing was for me.
Mhm.
Whereas when I was younger, because I went straight away to Malaysia, I had to set into a new school. I had like was living with my grandparents. It was just too exciting, and I didn't really process anything. But I don't really mind, because it was a nice distraction. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, grandparents never complain, right? And they pamper you and pet you. So I guess it is the best
Yeah.
distraction one have. I totally agree with that one, for sure. Because people who know me know that I was very, very close to my grandmom, and my daughter lived for a year in Sri Lanka with her both the sides of the grandparents. So she still cherishes going to Sri Lanka to spend time with them. So I can totally agree with that it was a good distraction. But as a teenager or as a young adult now, like over the time, would you say your understanding of it and the experience of it has changed, or it has more or less stayed the same?
It's definitely changed the experience in a positive way. So
Sure.
I think it just comes with age and understanding how it's working. When you realize that they're doing all of this for you, I think it just opens your eyes and makes you realize, like, okay, wow, this, if I wasn't here, they probably wouldn't be speaking at all. I mean, like, they're doing it all for me. So it makes you feel a lot more grateful. And like, you can't take sides, you have to understand the story from both people, both partners
Sure.
and both parents, and you can't take sides. Yeah.
Coming to you, Sandra, how was this experience of co-parenting changing for you and the understanding of it? Because, of course, like Tamara rightly said, she was at a different age, 10, 11 years old when you started, and particularly you went to Malaysia, so you had to deal with different things. And then you came back, you asked for the financial support, you said how your family was very supportive, your ex-husband, how you know the best relationship you could have, I guess, as a co-parent. How did that understanding and experience change for you over time, Sandra?
No, I really felt very blessed, very lucky that the co-parenting was very smooth for both of us. The only time that was difficult was when the father and daughter had quarrels. And when the father was complaining to me about she not making phone calls, she's not calling him, or she's doing something that he doesn't like. So then I would be the one who has to be the mediator. And that was the most difficult part for me, because I didn't like it when he tells anything negative about her or anything bad about her. I'm a mom. I do not want anyone to say anything negative about even the be it her own father. So I was but at the same time, I would allow him the space to say how he feels. And so giving that space and just listening to him, and then I would actually start talking about the bigger picture. But remember, she's a teenager. She's learning through a process, and the most important thing is she loves you and she cares for you. Don't forget that it's just a process. And then I have to say that the same thing about him to Tamara. So I was very diplomatic about it, and I always tell her, but remember the bigger picture, darling. He loves you, he cares for you, and that's why he's concerned about what you're doing. I remember, oh, Mom, but just because he cannot buy me off by buying gifts for me, And I just said, take that as a positive thing, not a negative thing. So you need to be thinking about, because I do not want to see Tamara being unhappy. If she is sad, I feel like 100 times more sadder, If there's a word called sadder, but I feel much, much more sad if she is sad. So I do not want her to feel sad. So it's important and not to disrespect. I learned never to disrespect her father to her, because I could say, if I say anything wrong about the father or something, that I could see her face change. She may not realize that, but I can see the change in her face if I were to say something that is disrespectful of her father. That could be my own personal opinion, but that's not hers. So I became wary about that, and not to put her father down, and always talk about all the positive things and also the good things that we have had in our relationship as well. So it was not like, we grew apart because of our differences after many years. So, but then there were good things in the beginning. So I would talk to her about that. She would tell me, she would say to me, never get married, never get back to with dad again. No. I'm happier like that, So that in a way, but what I learned was you do not need to be enemies anymore. You do not need to carry the bitterness in learning how to forgive, because as much as I think I want to forgive him because he's done this to me, but there's so many things he can say the same thing about me, that you did all these things to me. So it's about forgiving and letting go and thinking about, I learned about putting Tamara first, make that process much more easier to do the co-parenting.
Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's so important to know that what are your priorities, isn't it? That's what it is about. You're prioritizing Tamara over anything else, and saying, I have to put our personal differences aside to focus on what's best for our child together. And I really liked the fact that you said you learned that you cannot speak ill of the partner or ex-partner, because end of the day, that he or she is still the parent for the child. So it does affect them negatively if you do that. So thank you so much for saying that. So I know that you mentioned you had different difficulties, and also you learned a lot of lessons. So if you can tell me one of the major difficulty you had and one of the most important lesson you learned, what would that be?
The major difficulty was being the mediator between the both of them. It was not many times, but it was very few times, because as I said, I'm really, because Tamara's dad was also interested in her well-being the same way that I was in. So we both just have this mutual understanding. So it made it easier for both of us. So the difficult part was only one thing, was when I heard both of them complain about each other. And that was the only difficult thing that we had. And with regards to her education, we had a difficult time when she actually found a boyfriend. And so he was very upset and angry because we never disclosed that to him earlier, because I wanted to make sure that she's certain before I took it to him, because in a way, I didn't want him to think, oh, look at her, she had one boyfriend, another boyfriend. So I was trying to protect her. But he was upset because she didn't share that with him. So I said, okay, Sandra, what are we going to do over here? So we said, okay, listen, we will go to Scotland. We will go and see the boy. We'll go and visit his parents and see whether you're happy with him. And then we'll take it from there, So then we took the trip and we went together, and then he was very happy. And so, you need to think about, like I said, put your differences aside, What is it that's going to make her happy? So that was my learning point in here, is what is it that makes her happy? That was important.
Sure.
But what I would like to say is, like, the most important to think about when you're thinking about divorce is, like, people. I have got friends who have got they were in difficult situation when it came to co-parenting, because one partner is not in line with the other partner. They're not thinking about the child's future, the child's interest, but their own personality. Is to put the child first, the child's happiness. Put away your differences and do not disrespect the other partner to the child. That is the key thing, and is the child comes first. Sure. But your own well-being, but in the meantime, but remember, if you do not take care of your own well-being, you won't be able to process those things as well. So you need to take care of your own well-being as well.
Beautifully said, because today we were having this conversation on social media, like with someone whom I know from another course for a long time. And she was speaking about, as a single parent, how it was difficult to, because particularly in the banking industry, like the healthcare industry, it's very demanding, and how difficult it was for her to always juggle between her profession and the child, and then of course to have that mixed again with co-parenting. So it is a lot to take on, and I think sometimes we do let go of our well-being or put our own well-being at the background, and unfortunately you can't pour from an empty cup, as they say. So that's really important point you raised there, that it's important to look after us also, even though it sometimes sounds easier to let go of our well-being or to put our own well-being in the back seat to be able to cope with the entire situation. So thank you so much for that, Sandra.
If I may add one more thing, Menaca, it's also that I also learned about, I debunk myth, the fact that they always say, like, oh, children from single parenthood, they're going to be rotten, they're going to be spoiled, they turn out to be, gangsters or whatever. But it's a myth, it's not true, and there's no negative impact in terms of their wellness and their well-being and how they turn out to be. So I learned that, initially, because you always think about what people are going to say and the stigma, or how she's going to raise the child by herself, don't know what she's going to turn out, but that's wrong. And I've seen that with lots of people, including my friends and my family, and it's just a myth.
Yeah, thank you so much for saying that, because as I said, my daughter was quite young when we went through the divorce or separation. So, but there have been a lot of research done. There are research papers, if you want to go and have a look at it. I think, there is enough evidence to show what really matters is how the parents interact with each other and with the child, rather than whether they do it whether within a single house or two different houses. And there's enough and more evidence to back that up, that statement, what you said. And I think Sandra, we were having a chat and she mentioned there's a research done from Sheffield University as well. So if anyone wants to look it up, please feel free to look that up. And yesterday I was actually speaking with a psychiatrist, consultant psychiatrist, who is he is part of this talk show. Many times he comes, and I was telling exactly this point yesterday. I was telling, because of the stigma that, okay, if something, first of all, it's a stigma to be separated or divorced, and then to raise a child in a co-parenting situation. And then I think that brings that additional pressure for both the parents. If something goes wrong, there everybody's going to say, oh, you got divorced, that's why this child turned out to be like that. But it's not true. Children are children, parents are parents, individuals are individuals, and it's a combination of nurture and nature, and you can't expect any one product from any different root. It all depends on different aspects. And I think as a society, as a country, we have to embrace the fact, and we have to understand it and support the children, the parents, and the extended families to eradicate this stigma or taboo, and think how we can actually help them to nurture these children and bring them up the best possible way. I think that would be a much better way to look at it. So thank you so much, Sandra, for that, bringing that up. So coming to you, Tamara, what has been your learning from this experience, and what was the most difficult thing as well through this experience for you, Tamara?
Maybe I'd say that it was a bit difficult how well they co-parented, because I feel like I couldn't get all the benefits of them living separately, because if they were to just argue, I could go to my dad and say I want this, or go to my mom and say I want this, and just be like really selfish, really stubborn. So I think the fact that they co-parented so well, it meant that I couldn't stay out late. It's like as if they were just living together, and I couldn't get away with things because they were both involved in that one decision. That was, it would be cheeky to say, but it was a bit difficult because of that. But from my experience, I think I learned that they are, I told you earlier, they are closer together, closer apart. So I remember when we all lived on the same roof, it was like, it would be arguing, it wasn't a pleasant environment. It wasn't, not that I remember much of it, but I just know I feel a lot happier now. And I see them, I see my dad come over, I see my mum go over to my dad's house, even though like I'm here in Scotland studying, they still meet up, they'll go for walks, they still call and talk about me, they still like do things together. So they are definitely closer apart than when they were like under the same roof. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tamara. I love the word. I'm going to pitch it from you now. Closer apart. That is, so beautifully summed up, to say that nobody could, put this across any better way than that. It is really, really good, because it is so true. Many a times when it's not only with your partners, sometimes, distance makes the heart grow fonder, they say. So I guess there's something in it. And also, obviously, time heals everything, and we become better people, we evolve. So of course, all those aspects help. And I'm sure, as I can see you now and speak to you, and what a beautiful, intelligent young adult you have turned out to be. And I'm sure it's their pride and joy to share information about you, to celebrate you as well. So I'm sure it has made that bonding much easier for them to go further as well. And I couldn't stop laughing when you said, I almost felt I couldn't take advantage of being apart, because it came across to me saying I had the worst of both the worlds, because unlike other children, I had to be in two different houses. But however, I didn't have the advantage of doing it, where it is for my advantage. So it was tongue in cheek, but it was, it was beautifully expressed again. So it was really good to see the point of view from a child. And I think that's why it's so important, isn't it, for the adults to make those decisions together. And I remember my daughter would ask me when she was young, why do I have to ask, or why do I have to take permission, or what, like both the sides, because she saw both of us every single day, most of the time. And I would say, because both of us are your parents, you have to get the permission from both of us, regardless where you stay or where, so she always stayed in both houses. So it was very different. But I think that's what it comes down to at the end, isn't it? So, Tamara, for someone who has walked that path of being a child of co-parenting, what advice would you like to give to other children who are in that position? And what would your advice be for the parents who have those children? So, they're both sides of the coin, right? Children and parents in co-parenting. So what would you advise to them?
So for the children, I would say definitely don't take sides, because the divorce came from, you don't know the background story of the divorce. I mean, I certainly didn't. And so just because I lived with my mum didn't mean that I had to resent my dad. Although maybe in the beginning I didn't understand and I didn't know, like I automatically thought, okay, so who am I supposed to love more? Who am I supposed to like more? Because there's always one party that hates the other party, and then it gets a bit confusing. But when you realize that you just shouldn't take sides, and that your relationship with each parent is very different and it's very up to the individual. And so like there are some things that my dad would tell me that I'd completely disagree with, and the same with my mum, but it doesn't mean I would resent them because they're saying that. And also I think for parents it would be that like every action after the divorce has like a direct effect on the child. And so I think my parents went about it like in a very good way, like they were mature about it and they kept me out of it. So I think my only job was to just focus on my studies and just to get through school and stuff. And so it felt like divorce wasn't really my concern, although yeah, I didn't have a say, and like the child never really will have a say, but I didn't have to worry about it. And I was very distracted. My mom took me away to Malaysia, and like it was just too distracting to process the whole thing. And
Sure.
so yeah, so for parents I would say also not to tell the child things about the other parent, and because that can sometimes it did make me think like, oh, but why did my mom do that to my dad, or why did my dad do that to my mum? And you feel like you want to ask the other person, but you don't want to open a tin of worms and have them arguing again. So yeah, to just like not keep it to yourself, but and maybe wait till the child's a lot older to understand these things before you tell them. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much, Tamara. But in your speech, many times you mentioned how you went to Malaysia and how you spent time with your grandparents and how it shaped everything. So, do you think there is a role the extended family play in all this as well?
Yeah, I think there was a big role because I have a very big family as it is, and so I had a lot of social support when this was happening. It almost felt like it wasn't happening. I was still playing with my cousins. I was going to stay with my aunties. It was just nothing really changed. And then going to live with my grandparents was like such an honor because I'm the only grandchild in the family that got to do that. And so it was a very life-changing experience, especially to live in a different country. Yeah, they did play a big part, and also faith I think played a big part because my mum went to church a lot more and I went with my mum, and so that kind of taught me things. Yeah.
Sure. Thank you so much. So, coming to you, Sandra, what advice would you give to others who are co-parenting and their extended families? Because sometimes negatively or positively, the parents, of course, play a part that goes without saying, but the extended families and people around them also play the part, whether consciously or unconsciously. So, what would your advice be to them?
When it comes to family, we've got a very strange family here. My parents still think that Tamara's dad is still my husband, and they never took him out of the picture. And any family functions, he's always there, and everyone will say, please invite him. And he's the unofficial photographer for all our family events. And they all treat him with respect. And so that is very important because they know that the issue is between me and him, not him and the rest of the family or me with his family. So it's not that. So we need to remember that. And not, that comes same with the friends as well. Like when people get divorced, sometimes suddenly his friends will stop talking to me, or, my friends will stop talking to him. No, when I have friends over, I invite him as well to my house. And he still knows all my old friends and they still talk together. And that is how I would like that to be. But I have seen some of his friends who suddenly become kind of cold towards me because he he was their friend first, and I think that shouldn't be the case, because that's sad. That I'm not that kind of person, I see a person for who they are and all the positive things. So I think maintaining that is very important, because remember, if Tamara is getting married, I want my entire family, like ching bang, like hundreds of them will turn up, and I do not want her father to feel isolated amongst them. So we need to still keep them, because it's a long journey from now, so that's important. So family and friends, and that's very important. And the other question is, what's really important is able to, like I said, put the child first. Do not carry the bitterness. Forget about the things that went wrong. It's in the past. Somebody told me, just put all of them in a box, throw it in the sea with a big stone so it doesn't float up again, So forget that past, forget the journey that they will remember. I remember telling you, Menaca, I said, there must have been something nice about the partner that I fell in love with and I got married to. So why am I suddenly only thinking about all the things that went wrong? What about the things that really went right? What was it that I fell in love with? So how could that person be a monster? It couldn't be. So there was something. So I just still sometimes I hang on to that. And I always think about, look at the good things in the person. We all are not people who are evil. We are not. We all have good things in ourselves, and there are things about us that somebody else doesn't like about us. So remember that, and that are the things that keeps me going. So, and I would say to other people, so think about the good things, bury the bad things, and move forward with a lighter heart. So when you have forgiven, you become fresh and lighter, and that is how it has helped me. And I hope people would take that from today.
Sure. Thank you, Sandra, because it's so true, isn't it? All of us have positives and negatives, and in psychological term, lightness and darkness, or however you want to express it. Nobody is perfect. We all we are all a combination of different aspects of it. And I think sometimes we choose where to focus. So like you said, if we focus on the good things, and then it becomes so much easier for everyone to work as a family unit and take it forward, rather than dwell in bitterness and keep the grudge. And basically it's self-sabotaging yourself and the family. So beautifully said. Thank you so much for that. The last question to you, Sandra, because I know you came from Malaysia, you were married to an Asian. So can I ask you, is it more difficult in certain cultures than others?
I'm one of those person, grew up, I do not care what others are saying about me. I've never worried about what others concern are. And I remember my mom would always say, what will they say? Or what will they say? Or what will they say? What will they say? That's our culture. That's our culture. It's always, what will they say? What will they think? And I say, but they don't put food on my table. They do not put the roof over my head. They do not see to my happiness, So what's important is, it's that, it's because I grew up like that. So it was easier for me not to pay attention. And I think my family members and friends are very diplomatic when it comes to me. They wouldn't say anything to hurt me. None of my family members have ever said anything, oh, why they do us not look what the people are going to think about or what they're going to say now. So I think when your family loves you, when your friends love you, they will be positive towards you, and they would understand that. But it's only when people do not understand what real life is about, and they are the one who would have all these issues, and it doesn't bother me. I don't take it to what others think about me. It's not important.
Thank you so much, Sandra. We learned a lot. I mean, there's no secret. I mean, my mother was that person when I grew up. She used to be really worried about what people will say, what they will think, and how they will perceive it. However, when really it came to that point that I had to make decisions, and there was no question about it. So, I was like you. I was very, very lucky my family just supported me. At least the immediate family, definitely 100% was behind me. And I had really some very good friends who embraced me regardless of what happened. And like you said, I am still very, very blessed. Both the families get along really well. And if they see in a social gathering, nobody will even believe that these two families, at some point they did get married and get divorced. So there wouldn't be any trace of it. So I think it is a blessing to have people like that around you. So I think it makes a huge difference. So I think just wrapping this up, for me, I would humbly request everyone, it's not an easy process to co-parent, nor it is an easy process as a child to go through that process. So as the outsiders, may it be the extended family, friends, or the society, my humble request to you is nourish them, nurture them, and help them become their best versions and thrive, because they are, end of the day, they are part of your own community, your own society. Let them become that person who you will be proud of, who you would say they belong to us. And they would can tell you back saying that I am so blessed to be part of this society, part of this culture, part of this family and friends. So that would be my takeaway message. If you want to say one thing, Sandra, before we wrap that up, what would that be?
Take care of yourself. Your well-being is most important to anything else that you want to do in your life.
Sure.
When you are in the right place, everything else will fall in place.
Sure. Thank you. We have to finish with a youngster who had so much courage and confidence to come on this platform and speak. So over to you, Tamara. What is the one word you would want to say as the last one?
I would just say I can imagine it's really not an easy process, given that everyone's circumstances are different. I was quite lucky, like there was no like domestic abuse and all that kind of stuff going on, but I understand like other parents might. So the thought of co-parenting with the person who may have inflicted that kind of damage on you can be quite like challenging and detrimental. And so I would say like look after yourself first, but also like always put your child like at the center of attention.
Sure.
Hey, no, put the parent at the center of attention too.
Okay.
mother had to have the last word.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much, Sandra and Tamara Jayacodi, for being such a wonderful guest. So we will go into Q&A. Please hold on, because I'm sure there will be lots of questions on everyone's mind to ask. And thank you so much for being such wonderful speakers. So following tradition, let me announce the next speaker for next week. It will be our episode 35 of Meet Menaca. It would be Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who is a leading consultant cardiologist in Whipps Cross and Bart Health NHS Hospitals Trust in London, the United Kingdom. I have heard him speak, and he's an excellent speaker as well. So I cannot wait for him to come. And the topic would be Heart Disease 2021, who, why, and when. And particularly certain cultures, we are more prone to heart diseases. So I really hope that most of you would come and learn and listen and ask questions and take away the important messages, what he says, and hopefully we will become a healthier society together. So with that, about next week, over to my friend Kirbe Kohut to give the vote of thanks.
What can I say? Just to say thank you for those who are watching us on Facebook, and for all those on this platform. Thank you very much for being faithful followers of Meet Menaca Talk Show. We appreciate you, and we acknowledge the fact that you give time on a Saturday afternoon to be with us. Just a little quote that I found. It says, giving your children the freedom to love both of the families is one of the greatest gifts you can give them. Loving both parents, not having any disparity, and being being part of the bigger picture in this unfortunate separation. Sandra and Tamara, I'd like to commend you for this candid sharing today, because I think you bared yourself and shared this beautiful experience and journey that mother and daughter had with the daughter's father. And we like to thank you for sharing and enlightening and giving us the insightful thoughts about mindful co-parenting. Thank you, both of you, from the bottom of our hearts.
Thank you so much, Kirubai, as ever beautiful. What a thanks. It's question time now. A couple of questions up to 4 o'clock in the UTC, the UK time, and then we will have the after party, the unofficial get together, and then you could be able to ask more questions to the speakers. So the question is, kindly share your experience of inclusion of other partners when co-parenting. Over to you, Sandra, first, please.
Inclusion, I would say, is like making the decision when you're doing something for the child. And definitely in her education, when we were, her parent teachers meeting, so the father was involved, we would go together. Anything to do with her.
Rangier, WhatsApp audio.
Even when if she wants to buy something, we want to buy something for her, we make the decision together. So I always include him. And if I'm planning a birthday party, he's included as to what we should do for that. And so it's always thinking that if we are living together, what would you do?
Sure.
You won't make a decision on your own, would you? So why should it be different just because you're living separately? So it's having that mentality to say that and not looking at it differently. So that would make it easier. And he's always included in everything, every aspect of her life. And I think if I never include him, I'll be in big trouble. And I will never hear the end of it. So I have to make sure that he's included. Yeah.
Yes, so I'm sure it is the responsible thing to do as well. So thank you so much for that. Over to you, Tamara. I know that you are a child and you are not a parent yet. But what is your take on that, please?
Could you repeat the question for me?
Sure. So kindly share your experience of inclusion of other partners when co-parenting.
So I do agree with my mom in that she did have to go by my dad most of the time. In fact, I'm pretty sure he had the final decision, and he would often have the first input. He'd say the first thing, because I think my mum always often put him on a pedestal, and so for me to always respect him, and so she knows I could probably get away with more with her than I could with him. So he always had the final say, and he did really appreciate that, though. He did feel like he very much had that hold on me, and I was still his child, even though we're not really in the same house, if that makes sense. So yeah, he did really appreciate that.
Sure. Thank you so much. I mean, rightly so, right? Because whether you live in one house or two different houses, it doesn't really matter, because they're still your parents. So I think rightly so, they should have a say in it. So yeah, thank you so much for that. Is there another question?
Hello.
Yes, Dr. Navaratnam, do you have a question?
Rather a comment, maybe it might be interpreted in any way. There are two parties, two parents, mother and father, and the child. And the child, it's fortunate if, like the mother and daughter that we met, that they have a balanced view and good understanding.
Sure.
But sometimes that is the dispute between the father and mother may have been due to some genetic predisposition to disputes, and that might be inherited by the child. Then child becomes the relationship between the child and each parent can become a problem. I have seen this in my, not personal life, but in my experience as a doctor. And we need to take that into consideration while we are advising a family that has co-parenting.
Sure.
And
Sure.
I'm very happy that Sandra and Tamara have found a very good understanding.
Sure.
And it's a good story to look at.
Sure.
But there are families where a growing child, when they are 12, 13 years old, becomes difficult to manage. And I agree that the parents should behave as Tamara does, not Tamara, Sandra does, that is not to run down the other parent, although you may have had difficulty, difference of opinion.
Sure.
But this becomes, in fact, a challenge.
Sure.
When the child inherits some unwanted habits.
Sure. Thank you so much, Dr. Nagram. It is, thank you so much for that, because it is a fact, isn't it? It's not everything is rosy, and it's not easy for everyone, and everyone's case is not exactly same. It is different. And like I said, I am very lucky. Both the families get along. We are civil to each other. I wouldn't say ours. Every relationship, every child, every partner is different, because I was listening to Sandra and Tamara, and it's nothing like yours. Ours is, but it works for us. Whatever we do, it works for us. So, for every parent has their own way of dealing with things, provided it doesn't become detrimental to the child, then all is good. So I think, but it is very, very important aspect you brought in, Dr. Naradam. So thank you so much for saying that, because, we can't just take it for granted, because I don't know when you joined, but Sandra did go through initially. She did mention that she didn't even think about co-parenting because she had mental health difficulties and she had to focus on that, and she didn't have the energy or time to think about these things. So yes, thank you so much for bringing up that valid point. There are other questions come online, and I still have them.
Just one more comment. Mm-hmm. Grandparents do play a big part, and both grandparents should have this child's welfare at heart, rather than victimize the opposite side. And
sure.
This is one condition where both grandparents, that is father's side and mother's side, have to look at the child's welfare as the most important outcome. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Naradam. I couldn't agree more. So it's really, really important for everyone to know that, the end of the day, focus on the child and do your best, whether it is your parent, grandparent, family, friends. I think that's the message we want everyone to take home. So I think we have come to that time of the day to say goodbye to people who are listening to this from Facebook. So hopefully we will join again next week, same time, same place, to hear Dr. Sanjay Gupta, a leading consultant cardiologist, speak about Heart Disease 2021, who, why, and when. Until then, be safe, be happy, and keep smiling.